Welcome everybody to another of the NSMA's Continuing Education Series panels. I'm Dave Gordon, Executive Director. Thrilled to be joined today by Brian Clapp from workinsports.com and David Brunner, longtime talent agent, before that news director, chief cook and bottle washer, and actually he had the misfortune of representing me at one time, so there you go. So what I usually do is have our panelists go through their story of their path, how they got to be where they are today. And DB, since you're first in alphabetical order, I'll throw it out to you first.
All right. I was a graduate of Kutztown University. Started out as a reporter anchor, a lot of markets. Then became a freelancer, worked for some major networks. Then I became a news director, news consultant. Then I got tired of moving around. I got tired of being my decision in other people's hands, and I started the agency, a talent agency. We tried to do things a little differently here. Little did I know that 28 years I'd still have the agency and still going strong. We do things differently at our agency, but we think the things that we do differently not only make it different, but make it better than some of the other agencies that are out there. I've also in the past have been agent for some athletes, but that was right before I started the news talent agency. I tried doing that for a while and was successful and liked it, but it got to a point where I was dealing too much with the athletes' off-field problems as opposed to doing what I really wanted to do, which is try to help them get work and improve their career after their career on the field. So it's great to be here. I look forward to talking to you and maybe shed a little, hopefully give you a couple examples of things that we're doing in the agency. I look forward to hearing from Brian now.
Oh, thank you, David. Boy. Brian, God, I didn't even have to like pivot.
He's a pro. He's a pro. That was a pro toss right there. So thank you again for having me. I'm Brian Clapp. So I started in the sports media back in 1996. I was hired at CNN Sports Illustrated as a production assistant, which was a sports network, combined forces of CNN and Sports Illustrated set to combine with ESPN, and we can see how that worked out. So 7 years later, I was there for 7 years. I was a production assistant, I was an associate producer, and then I was a producer. So I was covering national sports, then went to Fox Sports Northwest in Seattle, where I was the coordinating producer, and then became the news director, and was there for a couple of years, long enough, we'll put it that way. And then I jumped to work in sports about 7 years ago. Decided to get more into the career development and professional development side. So I've been content producer, writer, and the VP of content and engaged learning. I've created online curriculums that are delivered to our user base and to colleges and universities to help them learn the skills that are specific, the strategies and tactics to get hired in the sports industry, because it is a little different than everywhere else. I'm also the host of our Work in Sports podcast, which explains why I have the extremely large microphone. The Work in Sports podcast, I've interviewed hundreds of different executives and hiring managers and all types of people in the sports industry to shed light on what they look for when hiring and what their journey to their position was actually like. I just finished up one just before joining here, actually. So pretty exciting stuff, and hopefully I can lend some advice in this today as well.
Well, thank you both for contributing your time and expertise today. So here we are in this COVID-19 pandemic that has thrown us all on our ear. Some sports are back with bumps, some haven't had many, and some are hoping to get back. Where is the sports media industry right now as far as hiring? David, I'll start with you.
I was hopeful about 3 weeks ago. We had some play-by-play openings for the first time in a while. And I was very excited, and I told my play-by-play guys, hey, we finally turned the corner. This is it. We're going to start seeing the play-by-play jobs. And about 2 or 3 days later, we started getting the word that the Ivy League had canceled their fall schedule, canceled their schedule. So it kind of was a false alarm, and I felt awful about getting my people excited about that, but I really thought that we had turned things around. I feel bad because some of my new clients came on with me in January. and the end of January. And to be honest with you, there's really not a lot that I've done for them since January, because you call around and you try to find out where the openings are, and of course nobody's doing anything. And anybody who really knows or thinks they know what's going to be going on in the next few months, they really don't know. So the thing that my clients and I have been doing is we've been talking through Zoom meetings and through personal meetings about how we stay relevant, how we stay out there, how we make sure that the hiring people know we're still out there and we're still interested. And I'll give you some of the things that we're talking about a little later.
Do you want to?
I want to give also, if I can, I've been telling people to go to websites like Brian's website, workinsports.com, because one of the things that we've been talking about is kind of looking at jobs that are on the fringe of sports announcing jobs. Like one of the things is a sports information director's job. Mm-hmm. I know in the past, my clients weren't that interested in it because it's really not broadcasting, but boy, you sure are going to find out where the jobs are going to be at your school if you're a sports information director, and you'll find out from other schools as well. So I think it's important that one of the things that we talked about is using websites such as workinsports.com to see what other jobs are out there that might be on the fringe of broadcasting, but ones that use our skills, the broadcasting skills, the news gathering skills, personality skills, communication skills.
So foot in the door. Brian, would you agree with that? What have you found?
Yeah,
in the last couple months?
There's so many different ways to take this question and this conversation. So we'll just dive into it. And I echo a lot of what Dave has to share. Just to give it an overarching kind of concept and background here, our job board prior to COVID around January was about 25,000 active jobs. And that's across all of sports. So it's not just media. It's a lot. It's sales. It's everything. When we hit the worst part of it, we were down to 8,000. So we went from 25,000 jobs down to 8 in about 2 months. So about March, April, things got that low. Now we're back up to 16,000. So if you're just watching the trends a little bit, you think of hiring as a 3-month to 6-month window. So if I need somebody 3 months from now, I'm going to start looking now. I'm going to post that job because I know the process is going to take some time to find that right person, to go through the interview cycle. So what that kind of tells you is that a lot of companies right now are at least hoping, guessing, suspecting that things are going to start to become clearer in the next 3 to 6 months. That's good. We're starting to see the trend head in the right direction. To give a little bit extra data to it too, and I want to dig into something Dave said, but let's dig into a little bit of the data first. We would, on our job board, we're broken down into 9 categories and 9 like buckets of sales, business development, marketing, communications, admin, HR, etc. I won't go through them all. Always, 100% of the time, sales is number one. Sales and business development, that category, the revenue generating jobs are usually about 50% of the job board. That's just where the demand is in sports, the revenue generating jobs. That is the 7th ranked category on our job board right now. There's nothing to sell, right? And that is a huge shift from where we normally are. So you have to ask yourself, well, where are the opportunities? Where are things? In media and creative, that's actually the 4th highest job category we have right now. It's behind only retail and lifestyle, which includes like Puma, Nike, those kind of companies, fitness and recreation, and tech and data. Tech and data also includes esports. So I'm just throwing a little bit of data out there so you know where the market is trending. Media and creative is high. So to add on to Dave's point, you, as anybody who wants to work in the media, has to start to think broader. You have to think about, what does storytelling really mean in this world? Because really, everybody that works in the media is a certain type of storyteller. So in this world, what does that mean? Digital content creation, SID work, whatever it may be, that you can start to pivot and still keep working those muscles for the media and storytelling. There's a high demand for media creative jobs in the digital sphere. And I mean, think about this. I have so many friends that are at our regional sports networks. And when this all happened, the first thing they did was say, let's go back. Let's go to the archives. Let's start pulling out old stuff and start broadcasting that. We'll show legacy games from 10 years ago, and it'll be great. It'll be a path down memory lane. And that was basically a stall technique as they tried to figure out where we're going next. What are we going to do now? And that whole time, everybody's sitting back and saying, we need to create more. What is the voice we want to start to have? What are the stories we want to start to tell? What does the future look like? And how do we disseminate information? I'll be honest with you. I think, honestly, the sports world in general, we've been somewhat handcuffed from a sense of innovation and creativity because of long-term media rights deals. When I was with Fox Sports Northwest, we had 10-year contracts with the Mariners. We had these deals that were set up. The Mariners didn't have to necessarily innovate. We were giving them millions of dollars every year. They had that locked in the bank. The revenue was there. Like, we had to figure out how to sell it. So everybody's locked in these kind of the way things have always been done. And I think now we're seeing when that live event goes away and we don't have that huge audience, is like, well, how are you then changing the business model to still attract the audience and still get the voice out there? If you think about it, and I just interviewed the director of partnership activation for the Atlanta Hawks, and I'm sorry for going too long here. I tend to do that. We just interviewed the director of partnership activation for the Atlanta Hawks. And if you look at trying to get marketing sponsors exposure, 20,000 people come to the event every night. You can get your product in front of them. You can activate this great thing, right? But now you don't have that. Well, what else do you have? They have 1.2 million Twitter followers. That's more than 20,000. I'm no math major, but that's more than 20,000. So creating interesting content in a digital world is what everybody that's in the traditional broadcast media should be figuring out right now. How do I reach that audience that is still dying for information and dying for creativity and is actually much more fluid and able to reach in many different ways? I think the platform is exciting right now, and those who innovate and become creative are the ones that are going to stand out.
Yeah. Going back to numbers, if I can, Brian brought them up. We're the only agency that actually sends out a weekly job list to our clients, and we include everything that we think a client might be interested in. The regular jobs, the news jobs, sports, weather, but also hosting, radio jobs, play-by-play, all that. The end of November, December, and January, the November, December of last year and January of this year, we were averaging about 100 and 110 jobs a week without even repeating jobs. Now, granted, some of those jobs are in markets 160, 170, 180, 190, but they were still jobs. COVID started middle of February. I was down to about 40, 45 jobs a week. I'm talking about all jobs, sports, news. Now, the good news, bad news was, there was weeks when I thought, oh, there's only going to be 7 or 8 jobs this week. And there was always at least 30, 40 jobs, which was great. The good news is that the news directors were posting. I would call, the news director said, yes, we intend on hiring somebody. The bad news is that they're not. Some of them are. I've had 2 instances this past week where the news director talked to my client, actually made offers to my clients, and then I got a call the next day saying that, well, I just had to talk with the general manager, and I didn't know this, but we're having a 90-day break. We're having a 90-day freeze on hiring.
Yeah.
So in recent weeks, I've seen the jobs get up to about, I think we had about 75 the past couple weeks, which is, again, great news. They are posting the jobs, so we're hopeful that since they're posting, they really do want to fill them. But there seems to be a communication problem between the higher ups, the management, and the news directors who know that their newsroom is decimated. They want to have people come in and work, but the big guys upstairs are saying, "Hey, we got to freeze. Let's hold. We don't know what's going on for the next 60, 90 days." So that's kind of the way it is from my end, as far as trying to get jobs for not only my sports people, but for my news and weather people and hosts as well. The numbers are down, but they're slowly rising up.
So communication issues amongst organizations, so things are still the same as they've always been.
One of the big things we talk about is we're in a job where it's communication, but not a lot of it goes on.
Right.
It's really a shame. It's kind of funny that this is our business, yet so little communication actually goes on.
It's true.
How much of that, Dave, do you think is, even when you started in the business 28 years ago, the trend was starting? Once upon a time, these were all independently owned TV stations. Now they're almost all owned by these media conglomerates, where not only is it news director to general manager, but then there's a VP of news, or there are 2 in some cases, and people above them, that communication just isn't getting between all those. There are more parties now.
Yeah, and also they're doing a very good job of keeping salaries all at a certain level. It used to be when I started as talent, and I use that term loosely, and then as an agent, you would see the big difference between, say, somebody working in market 150 to the next stage 130, and up, it would gradually go up. Now you see most stations between 50 and 130, 140. They all they pay almost the same thing.
Huh.
So that's the problem with having Nextstars and Sinclairs and all those stations owning so many properties. They can keep the salaries to a limit.
Yep, they band together.
So here we are in this, from what you guys said, it kind of bottomed out March, April, and now is kind of rebounding. Put your fortune teller hat on if you can. And I think it's putting everybody in an impossible situation because we don't know what is happening from day to day with this thing. Do you foresee things getting incrementally better, or are we going to just creep along, go up and down for a while?
I mean, I don't want to be overly negative because I tend to try to have a positive view on things, but I am going to try to be as honest as I can. I've had friends in the industry just as recent as this past week who had, 20 years at Fox Sports, who have been mentors of mine in the industry, people that I know and trust and like very much, that are extremely qualified, who worked on shoulder programming for live events. They did pre and post, they did pre and post shows, and they got furloughed or laid off completely just this past week. It's tough out there, and anything that's directly related to live events is not. The broadcast side of things is just not clicking. But again, I do think the storytelling and the need to fill content is still out there, and there is just a shift where you have to start looking at digital properties. You have to start looking at other ways to do a similar operation to still be a story. I mean, a lot of businesses are thriving right now. A lot of digital and online programs are thriving right now. So there is an appetite. It's just got to figuring out where you want to go to eat.
Yeah, it's kind of the reason that what we're doing today is here. When I'm in my office in downtown Winston-Salem, we were forced to leave on March 27th. And I said, oh, what am I going to do? We had our big fundraising dinner was scheduled for April 30th. We knew we were postponing that in hopes that it wouldn't be canceled, hoping we could do it in the fall. Knew already that we had canceled our awards weekend, which was scheduled a month ago, last weekend in June. So what am I going to do? So I took home my computer and my 2 monitors and a box of archival material. And then that last week I was in the office, I started interviewing the winners of our Jim Nantz College Sportscaster of the Year Award. So all of the young people who had been presented with that award at our awards banquet going back 9 years. And then I talked to John Chalesnik, who owns STAA, the organization that actually is responsible for that award. I talked to Wes Durham, whose idea it was to go to John Chalesnik and see if he wanted to present it at our banquet. And I finally got a hold of Jim Nantz and interviewed him. So I put together an 11.5-minute reporter package. I had to dust off some editing skills and did that. And then I B-rolled all of the individual interviews and put all those up on our YouTube page and figure drive a little bit of interest, a little bit of add value to our membership, and then that birthed this, which is a weekly continuing education series where we're doing subjects of interest to mainly geared toward the younger people, but we have people of all ages and all levels of experience on this. So
2 things, if I may.
That was the pivot there. Go ahead, Dave.
I'm sorry. No, I received 2 calls in the past 2 weeks. I guess one was the Big Ten. And they're asking me if I know anybody who has content, anybody who has old content. They're afraid of possibly not having a football season, and they were calling me and asking me if I had anybody who I get in contact with content. They were very interested. They were in a big hurry. So the 2 things that we've been really stressing to our clients, the first one is social media is free. Social media is where everybody's going now. They have a lot of time. They're spending a lot more time on social media. I've been telling my clients to post something at least once a week. Not necessarily your latest work, but some of your best work. Interviews that you've done in the past, calls that you've had, scoped down. Just keep your name out there. Make sure you're relevant. I don't want to go a whole year without getting in contact with people and getting people's names not out there for a year. That's a long way to go. So I've been telling my clients to please post on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, all of them. Just packages that you've done, calls that you've done. Just stay out there. You never know. I still get calls from news directors on a weekly basis saying, "Hey, I happen to see something online, and I know that that's your client. We'd like to talk to him." So please use social media as much as you can. It's free, and it really
100%.
is a great way. People are going there. And the other thing that we're stressing is what I said earlier, which is we kind of need to look at the fringes. We kind of have to look under rocks for jobs that may not be broadcasting jobs, but that use our skills, our skill set, our communication skills. And I think that at least in the interim, that will help. I mean, for instance, if you're a sports information director, you're going to find out quicker than most people are who's going to need play-by-play openings for volleyball, basketball, whatever. Again, that's a job that a lot of my clients really hadn't thought about in the past, but they're really thinking about it now. So again, the social media, using it, being on it, and also looking under rocks and looking under websites like workinsports.com that they may not have in the past for openings. So.
David's
That's
better
great
at this than I am. David's much better at promoting than I am. I'll add too briefly that I think that this is a time for creative people to step forward.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is, so I'll give you a quick example. I just finished interviewing Shabazz Khan, who is the director of digital content for the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Lynx. And I was asking him, like, well, what did you do to get hired? And this is pre all of this. This is pre-COVID, pre-everything, okay? And he said he literally set up a fake account on Twitter and did the job that they were interviewing for. And then he went to them with this portfolio saying, this is how I would live tweet a game. This is how I'd share information. This is my voice. This is my style. This is how I work. And they had a product right there they could look at. It was proof of concept right there. And I thought that was a very creative way to approach the problems we're currently facing. So often you get people nowadays, and this isn't meant to generalize, it's just saying, like, everybody is blaming the scenario. It's a terrible scenario. We're all dealing with it. So fix the problem. What can you do? Can you be a little different? Can you be a little bit creative? Can you shift and start doing something a little bit different? Can you approach this differently? Can you take this time to network and to make more contacts in the industry? Can you build stronger relationships? There's so many things you can be doing. I know that I've talked to a lot of people when they're interviewing right now. One of their top questions they're asking is, what have you done over this quarantine? What have you done to learn? Have you picked up another skill? Have you learned Photoshop? Have you learned how to do paid media on social? Have you read books? I want to know what you did with this time. Did you just take it off and sit on your couch and watch The Last Dance on repeat? Or did you do something? So have your story lined up and ready to go, and be ready to say, I was doing these things. I took a LinkedIn course. I did an online course here. I did this, got this certification. I learned Photoshop. Whatever you can do to enhance yourself, make yourself more marketable, come off in a creative sense in order to stand out from the crowd is what you need right now. Those that are innovating are winning. Those organizations that are pivoting quickly and saying, all right, we can't do internships this summer. We're going to put together a virtual internship program. Those are the companies to admire. Look at those companies that are adjusting quickly and those that are shifting and coming up with new innovative processes. That's what you need to look to right now. And that's what needs to be your model. Don't get stuck in the way things have always done. Try to think about where we're going.
Yeah, I've actually had a couple clients who started their own talk shows. One guy does it on a weekly basis. I have a couple who actually do it on a daily basis. I don't know how many viewers they have, but it is something to keep them busy. And again, you never know who's going to see it. But I think it keeps your skills out there too. You're not just sitting around wasting away, as you say, doing nothing for 7 or 8 months. You can say, hey, I'm doing my own talk show. I think it shows initiative, and I think it's a great idea.
There have been at least 10 people that I've interviewed for our podcast that have started their own podcast doing the exact same type of show that I do. So I would suggest against that. Okay, don't compete with me. But other than that, you go for it.
The guys I have a niche. You know what I mean? They're not doing just a general, it's kind of niche-y. You know, one's about basketball, one's just about baseball, certain. So it's not just a general one. It's really niche-y. so I don't think you have anything to worry about.
One's about left-handed relief pitchers who
Yeah.
were born in
Yeah,
May,
yeah, yeah.
who hail from.
I had Chris Valente, who's the director of sales for Fenway Sports Management, and is a good friend of mine. I'm not really criticizing him, but I had him on the show a year ago. And then when coronavirus hit, he goes, "Hey, I think I'm going to do a podcast exactly like yours. Can you support it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I guess. I mean, sure. You want to do a competing podcast with me? But yeah, sure, okay, I get it."
So Brian, look, some of the things you said, I've done. I've been learning Photoshop by the seat of my pants, as I do most things. Kind of pivoted to producing content. I'm 60 years old. I just graduated from college in May. What should I be doing? Probably some of the things that you said already, but what
Had time to take a drink of water?
Yeah. What skills as a young person?
Yeah.
With no experience to speak of. What can I be doing to get ready for when this job market opens back up?
Yeah, it's tough. What I think, okay, so when this all first happened and we shut down initially, and this is where agility comes in, my whole argument for the first month or two was, and this is not trying to predict what was going to happen, but at the time, a lot of us were saying, every team is losing revenue right now. So when the job market opens back up, they're going to be looking for revenue creating jobs. They're going to want salespeople everywhere, right? But that is not happening because it just keeps getting pushed further and further back. So this is a very fluid situation. As you started this whole thing off, none of us can really exactly predict how this is going to play out in the long run. If it were me and I was getting into if I was a recent graduate or something like that, I would be learning Photoshop. I'd be learning how paid social media works, budgeting, understanding the revenue flow so that you can not only create content, but you can actually put a budget behind it and actually measure return on investment. So you can start to actually track the impact of what your social contents would be doing. So many jobs that are in content now, they report into somebody who's a bean counter. So I will say, everybody that I've worked with in the sports media, that my boss, like top dogs, they all had revenue backgrounds. They were all salespeople and they were working in revenue backgrounds. So when you were in these big meetings with them, you need to be able to speak in their terminology, which wasn't ratings, it was revenue, right? It's like, if you talk about how the show was really popular, that's nice, but how much revenue did it bring in? What's the conversation we're having with advertisers? What partners do we have? So the better you can become more agile and understand how revenue comes into this whole equation, I think makes you stronger. So having some business analyst type background, understanding how paid campaigns work through Facebook, work through Twitter, work through LinkedIn, so you can operate those and manage those budgets. So it's not just the creative side, it's also the business side, and then also that creative side. So knowing Final Cut Pro, knowing all the tools that are out there and available, knowing Photoshop and After Effects and some of those products that you can turn around quickly. That's really where the power play is right now. So it's not just being creative, it's being able to think strategically, think in a business oriented way, think revenue, and also because, I mean, these organizations are starving for revenue. And if some kid can have a YouTube channel where he opens Lego packages all day long and thousands of kids watch him and he makes millions of dollars, you can't tell me that sports can't do the same. Why aren't sports monetizing digital as much as they should? And that's where I think the action is going, is monetizing content.
I will pick up on the business side there, because I was guilty of not wanting to have anything to do with the business side, except for going to visit the salespeople TV station because I was friendly with them. I tell younger people now, at the very least, take one business class in college.
Oh yeah.
Just so you have an understanding, like as you said, Brian, of how sales work. You know, what you do as a creative on-air person, how that affects the money that the salespeople bring into the station so you can get paid. Understanding, so when you go negotiate your contract, and David, you can maybe extrapolate on this, when you go in to negotiate your contract, you know why your boss is offering you this instead of that plus $10,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can recall a time when I was asked to negotiate a sports director's contract, and I had all the information down about when he would show up at 20 after the hour, how the ratings would go up, the number of people would watch, and I had all my information and thought, I'm gonna get my client a raise in the middle of this contract. Well, I got a lesson from from the news director and general manager when he told me, okay, you're right about all those things, but let me tell you what the numbers are with social media. Your guy is like number 9 in all the sportscasters in New Orleans with followers. Your guy is number 8 with tweets. With it basically shot everything down. I mean, again, ratings didn't mean anything. It was all about content and where he was with social media. So I learned a lot about that about 2 or 3 years ago, how news directors and general managers are thinking about that. So I do agree with you. The more things that you do, and when you're up, there's so much competition. I mean, literally, you're 150, 160 people for one job. If you can do something differently, if you can do something that no one else has thought about, and you can talk about actually making money for your station, you're going to go to the front of the line.
I'll add to that. I remember very vividly when I had segments or a lot of people seem to think that you can't do content and be worried about sales. And I disagree with that, because if I could come up with something creative and have a content idea that could really be cool on our show, if I could present this and say, here's sponsors who might be willing to be involved in this, and here's why, here's our market and what it looks like, here are the people to be watching, here's how much it would cost, here's what they could get for exposure, well, then my team can go out and get the whole thing sponsored. The two things are working together. They're not always working in opposition. So we did this. I remember this vividly. It was around the time of early American Idol, which is dating me again, but nonetheless, we wanted to do the same thing. We wanted to do like a sportscaster competition on our show. So we had literally at a bar with Sir Mix-a-Lot, who was one of our judges, who was judging people who would come up from the crowd and would want to pretend to be a sports anchor, and they would get a chance to win. So I went to our sales team and said, we're coming up with this concept. We think it would be great if you guys got on board with it. We're going to do it at a bar. You should really talk to your contacts at Budweiser and see if they want to sponsor it. They ended up wanting to sponsor it. The whole thing got paid for and then some. So you have to think about how content and partnerships and sponsorships can interact, because everything can run smoother after that. You can actually get your content created because it matches up for the people that are upper decision makers. If they're getting the revenue coming in to go along with it, they're going to love the content. So those two things can work together.
Yeah, I had a couple of people who had the idea. They were all excited about, hey, I'm going to do a podcast, and I'm going to do it weekly, and it's going to be about this or that. And 2 or 3 weeks later, I would say to them, hey, by the way, how's the podcast going? Oh, I'm not a salesman. I'm a talent. I can't make the phone calls. I can't have a show. I can't make any money. Well, I mean, unfortunately, part of it is making the phone calls and getting sponsors. Again, if you're talking to 10 candidates and 9 of them say, well, I kind of did a podcast and thought about doing it, but it wasn't successful. And the 10th one says, oh, by the way, I'm doing a podcast. It is successful. And here's how I got my sponsors there. So again, you're going to go to the front of the line. So
100%.
I understand that. And I do understand that we are broadcasters, and, broadcasters were kind of upset. Well, I'm not a salesman. Well, I mean, you really are. I mean, you're selling your product, and it's you. You're selling your product, which is the podcast. And if you can do a good job of selling that and getting sponsors, you're better selling yourself as well. So
anything that can if you can make your company money, they're going to want to hire you and keep you, is the bottom line. Let's start taking some questions from the people on the call here. If you don't mind, either hit your hand raise icon or send me a private chat message, and we'll get you going. Brandon, say your last name for me. Go ahead and unmute.
Biscobing.
Makes sense. Where are you, Brandon?
I'm in North Myrtle Beach in South Carolina right now.
Okay. Well, welcome. What's your question?
Yeah. Well, I had a couple of questions, but first I wanted to ask, you guys were talking about, creating your own content and ways to kind of put yourself ahead of people by doing your own thing. When it comes to the TV side, I've never done TV on an actual level, but I want to try to expand my reach. Is doing just, a news report or a sports report or whatnot on your computer with your webcam enough, or would they want you to do a more professional look?
Gentlemen?
I mean, again, I'm all about using social media, and I've been telling. I know that some people have access to their vault, and they keep packages that they've done and games that they've done, so it's easy for them to post things. But I do have people who say, hey, I want to go out and do new content. I want to go around and do it. So you can do it. There's also some, I believe there's a couple websites where they actually show you. I'm amazed when I look at some of the things that my clients have posted. I'm like, did you get a professional photographer for this? No, I shot everything with my iPhone.
Yeah.
Really? And also, some of my radio people have told me that they've got a beautiful studio in their spare bedroom or a walk-in closet, and they said they spent $200-300 for it, and it sounds fantastic. So I think you can make new content, and it's really not that hard at all. I mean, the things that I've seen that are being shot by an iPhone is almost better than the stuff you see on TV with professional cameras.
I agree. I would also add, don't limit yourself by this idea of perfection or complete like network broadcast quality. You need to be out there and showing, like, okay, if I was evaluating a tape or watching somebody's demo reel or something like that, I'm not looking at the quality of photography. I want to hear them. I want to hear their personality. I want to hear their voice. I want to hear their delivery style. So if it doesn't look perfect, don't worry about that. Get your voice out there. Get your persona out there so that people can start to understand who you are. That's really what this is. You're hiring somebody because you're guessing who they are and who they can be. And you can work on things like photography angles, and you can work on things like microphone quality. But I'm going to be able to tell a little bit more about your personality if you're putting yourself out there. So don't stop performing for fear of not being network quality. Get out there and be consistent. The biggest thing I see all the time is people read too many of these articles where it's like, I grew my Instagram followers in 2 easy steps and I have 10,000 people following me now. And then you try to do it and you have 5 people following you, so you give up. Forget all that stuff. Get consistent, have a voice, have a persona, and create. Get in love with the creation process. And then don't get attached to how many people are looking at it. Don't get attached to how many comments you're getting. Get in love with the content creation side and let everything else start to happen along with it. And keep learning each time too. Go back and watch your work. Go back and have somebody else watch your work. Be open to feedback. Be open to criticism. And to understand where you're good, where you're bad, where you need to do work, and keep trying to improve and get better. When I go back and listen to the first podcast I did, they were shit. Pardon me. I probably shouldn't have sworn. They were not good, okay? I go back and listen to them now and I'm embarrassed, okay? I don't even know that they're that good now, but I give it a shot, It's like, have some fun with it, try to have a voice, try to have a personality, and just get into that groove of creating content. And you'll find that you just start to enjoy it.
I do already have 2
okay I'm sorry. It's okay to be different too. Try something new. I mean, it's you. Don't try to copy or emulate somebody else's show. Just be yourself. And again, news directors and hiring managers are going to say, wow, look at the creativity that this guy or woman is doing. This is fantastic.
It's 100%.
Learn how to tell a story, period.
Yeah.
Do you have one more, Brandon?
Yeah, well, the only other question I had, David was talking about his clients and being an agent, what's the best way, whether it's with you or with someone else, of going about that and getting an agent, or whether you should or not, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, there's some people who really don't need agents. Some people just need somebody who actually will sit down and critique their work and say to them, look, I can help you or I can't help you. You'd be surprised that there's a lot of news directors who work at stations who are supposed to do that with their employees, and they don't. They just don't have the time to do it. So a lot of times I'll look at somebody and I really like their work, and I'll be honest with them. I'll say, I really don't think that you need an agent, but let me tell you about things that you can improve on. Most agents are pretty accessible. If you just send them a note saying, hey, I'm interested in possibly being a client of yours. Here's some of my work. Let me know. I know I do. I get back to people within 24 hours. So it's really as simple as that. Just be sure that you send them a resume, and you also send them some of your work to make it easier for them to get back to you.
Can I add on that? Can I add on that real quick too? For everybody listening that wants to do any kind of on-camera work, start working on the toughness of your skin right now. Because I can't tell you how many people have sent me their demo reel and said, can you take a look at this and give me some feedback? And I'll give feedback. I'll give honest feedback. And then I never hear from them again because they didn't like what I had to say.
Yeah, that's
So,
a problem.
toughen
Somebody
up.
will say, yeah, that's a problem. Some people say, hey, listen, be brutally honest with me, and you
Yeah.
are, and they don't like that.
Toughen up.
I'm
Toughen up. Not everybody's going to tell you how great you are. Okay, you got to work at it. You got to be willing to take the punches. It is a tough-skinned organization, world, industry. So don't be afraid to toughen up a little bit.
Everything you do, your parents think is great. I mean, you show your parents, and they think it's just wonderful, but they really don't know. Like example, people ask me all the time, what does a news director look at when you send a tape? And the bottom line is it's storytelling. They want to make sure that you can tell a story with video. Also, stories need to be well written. They need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I'm amazed when people graduate. They've gone through 4 years of broadcasting school. They're looking for a job as a reporter in either in news or sports, and it's 5 minutes of them walking around interviewing people. I remember there was a few where people sent me guys and men and women in bathing suits, and they walked around the pool interviewing people. Hey, tell me what you're. That's not what a news director wants to see. A news director wants to see things that are actually going to go on TV. So you actually have to sit down and make sure that you show them packages with beginning, middle, end. Packages that you can run that you're going to be hired to do. It doesn't really help you. I mean, there's some things you can do. You can have a radio show and you can do other things to show your personality, like Brian said. But if you're looking for a job as far as radio or TV, you have to have the elements in your tape that show that.
And remember too, when you're storytelling, remember who the story's about. I see this happen a lot, especially in local TV. Now, most of my experience is in network, and so I have a little bit different perspective on this. But I used to see demo reels from people who are coming up in local TV, and they always made the story about them. It's like, watch me shoot baskets with, player X, or watch me throw the hammer with this person who's preparing for the next Olympics. And while having your personality is important and things of that nature, and sometimes that's a way to tell a story, just remember that the story tends to be about the other person. And so your talent comes through in the way you're able to tell their story and make it interesting. And don't always make everything about you.
Yeah, I interned for one of the greatest storytellers ever, Charles Carroll. And I'll always remember something that Charles Carroll told me. People would send him tapes from all over the country doing his type of stories on the road. And he was always saying to me, he goes, when this story gets ruined? When the announcer rides the bike.
Yes.
When the announcer throws the basket. That's
my biggest pet peeve.
Yep, that's when the story goes downhill. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let's get to a couple more questions.
I think Dave and I could go on and on and on.
we all could. Dominic, if you would unmute and go ahead and ask your question. Dominic, can you unmute?
Bottom left.
Still muted. I cannot unmute you, so you'll have to unmute yourself. All right, we'll come back to Dominic. Sunil, go ahead.
Oh, thanks, David. Appreciate it. It's good to have Brian and David, sit on this call. I just, the past 4 to 5 months, of course, covering no games, I've been able to, focus more on feature articles, I said interviewing, players and coaches. Actually, last week or a couple of weeks ago, I was able to interview actually a local high school athlete who had some success in college and then went on to actually be a musician, as said, and had a pretty good run at that. So I guess any advice maybe as far as I know, David, you said about utilizing social media, just as far as being able to expand. I've always been behind the scenes, just writing, said really not in front of the camera. So I was just wondering if you guys might just be able to offer any, any tidbits, just on what I could do, said just to, as far as broaden, said my reach, said especially in social media.
Nothing wrong with posting the things that you're writing. And also, I have news for you people. If you want to work in TV and you want a job, the easiest way is to be a producer.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to be a star and everybody wants to be on TV. But I'll tell you what, I mean, I get calls 8-10 calls a week from people saying, DB, send me, who are your producers? I need producers. I'm down 2-3 producers. Again, that's another job that's kind of on the fringe that you should really talk about, especially somebody that has great writing skills like you do. That's a job that, I mean, you'll get hired in a second if somebody.
And I loved being a producer.
Yep.
Oh, I loved being a producer. It was great. I'll add to it really quickly too. Reverse engineer all of your content. Go at it and say, who is the audience for this? Who's going to be really into this? And who are those digital providers that cover that audience? So you might say to yourself, like, this is a great, I'm just going to throw things out. This article, this story is a great match for Bleacher Report. This is right up their alley. Now, obviously, it's not as easy as submitting to Bleacher Report, but I'm saying, think about how you can grow. If you're working as a freelancer, you're not working for a specific brand or specific online property. If you look at it and say, okay, I've got this interesting story, I think people will be interested in it. Where do people that would be interested in this hang out? Where do they go? Where do they want this kind of information? So is it a music blog because this person got into music from sports? Is it a sports content site that can show the transition of going from, working here to working there? Like start to think of it that way, of the audience out. And then if you start to go that way, you can start to really form your niche, and you can get into those niche sites, and you can start to build out where you've been published, and then you start to have a portfolio altogether. So start to think of it from that direction as well. Good to see you, by the way, Sunil. I know
same here. Another thing is about personal website as well, Brian. I'm trying to get that up and running, get my work on there as well. And, I mean, of course, resume and, bio, but most importantly is, posting my content, of course, on a personal website here.
Mm-hmm.
I will say it's very scary that now, in a 24-hour period, I have heard the term reverse engineering on 2 Zoom calls.
I thought I was unique.
A Wake Forest faculty peer-to-peer call yesterday. We're doing them every day this week and again in 2 weeks to learn how to deal with online or blended classroom experience, depending on what it comes to. And one of my fellow faculty members talked about reverse engineering. When you're using technology online, why are you using it?
Yeah.
I mean, but that applies to what you're
saying. I'm as smart as a professor. Awesome.
Exactly. Shoot, I'm a professor, so if I can do. So there's another thing you can probably do, everybody on here, because if you can tell a story, you can be a good teacher. And that's anyway.
I talk too much and too fast.
Show pictures with it, you'll be fine. Mm-hmm. Next question, TJ. Go ahead.
For radio.
You're muted already. There you go.
Hi, guys. Dave, and Brian, thank you for doing this for us today. My question is more on the producer. We kind of just touched on that, and with demo reels and that kind of thought. When you're trying to get your producer demo reel out, you're not dealing with on air where in 2 minutes you can decide. It's more deeper than that, probably. Is it okay to take old footage that you've done maybe at a network level, ESPN or one of the regional sports networks, and kind of just create your own YouTube page and say, this is some of the things I've done, these are some of the live events? Just wondering, because I've had some issues where people are like, well, I don't know you. How do I know what you do in a control room or in a TV truck?
It's a good question. It is a good question. It's a different way of presenting yourself. I was somewhat lucky in that I worked up within an organization. I worked up within CNN Sports Illustrated to become a producer. And then, when our network disbanded, everybody went out and was at different networks. So it was kind of easy to have a built-in network of contacts throughout the industry. What I would say is to lean hard into your network, because it's going to help to get producer jobs if somebody else can vouch for you. If somebody else can say your temperament, because I actually think that's one of the most important parts of being a producer is your temperament in the control room and your temperament. I mean, it's obvious you need storytelling ability and structure and organization, but your temperament in the control room is an important one. I think you can build out a longer form demo reel on a YouTube channel or something of that nature that you can highlight some of your work and direct people to it. You can really design out a pretty cool web YouTube channel and put in a varying amount of your work. So maybe you can categorize it and have stories that you've produced, and you can have shows that you've produced, and you can have, live events you produced or anything of that. So you have it in categories, and then right there in one quick glance, somebody going to your channel that you direct them to through your LinkedIn LinkedIn profile or through your resume, they can see right there, they can say, okay, this person's done studio work, field work, they've done segment producing, they've done whatever. So it almost is like a living document for you where you can put in a lot of your different work, and then they can choose their own adventure of where they want to look at you and see where you fit. So I think that you can be somewhat aggressive in your digital portfolio that way and use the tools that are out there like YouTube to create your own channel. But really, I think lean into your network too and talk to those people who are decision makers within the industry and that you may have a thread of a connection to, and reach out from LinkedIn and try to see if you can start a conversation there and see if you can work at that angle as well.
Nice. David, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised. As an agent, sometimes you have trouble getting through to news directors who don't know you. But I got news for you. If I say I've got some producer candidates for you, boom, I get through right away. So even if you want to start cold calling news directors and let them know that you're a producer candidate or that you're going to be sending them your producer package, I guarantee you're going to get attention right away. Now, not some of the huge markets, but some of the medium to smaller markets. I'm telling you, there's a need for producers now. It's a great way to get started.
Yeah.
Boy, when I was just starting out in TV, the news director at the NBC station in Providence said, if you want security in this business, be a producer, not an on-air talent.
Yeah.
It only lasted 24 years. So. Before Brandon asks another question, just want to reiterate, since I don't have the background up yet, this series is sponsored by Greater Winston-Salem, Inc., so thank you to them for that. Those of you who are on for the first time, we encourage you to join the National Sports Media Association, which is easy tab. Join today on nationalsportsmedia.org. It's very reasonable, and with things like this every week, we think it's well worth it. Also, these continuing education series panels are recorded. We put them on our YouTube channel, which is National Sports Media Association on YouTube, so you can see it there. And Brandon, go ahead and unmute and ask another question.
Yeah, you guys were talking about, doing, producer stuff or anything when it comes to, TV or radio, but, when you're in a certain market and you may not have worked with the local TV or radio stations, you're doing stuff on your own. What's the best way to contact those stations and say, hey, I'm in the area, I'm available if you need any help with anything, stuff like that?
If you call the newsroom or you call the front desk, ask for the newsroom or news director's email, and they'll usually give it to you. And at that time, you have it, and you can send a quick note with a package. Just say, hey, I'm in. And listen, the two things you have to mention is that you're interested in producing and that you're local.
Yeah.
Those are the two. If you let them know, be sure you let them know that you're local, because then you'll get the attention.
Yeah, because you have knowledge of the local market and they don't have to think anything about relocation fees. So that's like money dripping from their ears. They're like, I don't have to worry about relocating anybody. I don't have to worry about the month it takes to get somebody in a hotel for a while, or, get them a rental car, or have them, have to help them with any kind of assistance or per diem as they come to town. Like, that is music to their ears that you're local, you know the market, and you're not going to cost them extra money. Like, they're excited.
There's a story that I tell, and I can't tell it because of where we are. But they want to hire local people so that they know correctly the pronunciations of the counties.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, and I know it sounds kind of strange, but it really is. I mean, if also the fact that you're local makes them feel that you've got family, that you've got a reason to be there. You're going to stay a little.
You're going to stay. Yes.
And that's to your advantage too. I mean, I know people who have gotten jobs over more qualified, better people just because they were local people who knew the pronunciations of things. They knew where everything was. And they also said, hey, I'll be honest with you. I don't want to go anywhere. My family's here. I'm married. My wife is a teacher. I've got family. I've got kids. I have no reason to want to go, because most people kind of go with the idea of, I'm just going to put together a tape and I'm going to leave in a year or two. If they hear you're going to stay for a while, again, that's a feather in your cap as well.
It's so true. And I went from national news at CNN Sports Illustrated to then working at a regional network at Fox Sports Northwest. I moved to Seattle, and it's Issaquah and Snoqualmie and Snohomish and all these towns. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know how, like to Dave's point, like, I don't know what these places are. I don't know that who did what in 1974. So all the fans are going to see right through you. Like, if you have legacy knowledge of a market, that really entrenches you and can make it so much easier. That was the hardest part for me, was moving markets and trying to really get deep and intricate knowledge like a fan would in that marketplace. If you already have that, that's part of your leverage. So make sure you use that.
Unfortunately,
if you don't have
really
that,
but
go ahead, Brandon.
unfortunately, I don't really have that fully because I did move here 6 years ago. But it's still I've
That's
been
still pretty good.
Yeah, but you're still local.
Yeah.
So, and I think another thing when you're looking for this type of job, this is my idea. You want to kind of make sure you've exhausted everything locally before you kind of start going outside that circle. I mean, the worst thing in the world is to spend money moving to a new city, and then you find out a week later that, oh, you mean there was 2 openings at the station in my hometown? I didn't know about that. So I always think it's important to just start locally. Really exhaust everything you can locally. Then I would kind of branch out, make that circle bigger. But I think you'd really be surprised. Now, people are probably going to go today and they're going to start calling news directors for producer jobs and find out that
Dave told me to.
But I mean, it really is. There's a need because everybody wants to be on air. So, and you can make a nice living and have stability in the business by just being a producer. And you're closer to. I mean, you're doing everything that an on-air person would do.
And I'll add to that too, like to Dave's point, like, yes, start with your inner area because you have leverage there, you have knowledge there, all that makes sense. But you also have to have the frame of mind that you are willing to move for the job if that's where the opportunity is. Because I know plenty of people that started in Pocatello, Idaho, then went to Bozeman, Montana, then went to Champaign, Illinois, then went to Salt Lake City, and now they're looking to go to like you're climbing the market ladder, you're moving up in the marketplaces and trying to grow. And so if you're really committed to, I want to be on camera, I want to be a sportscaster, I want to do whatever, you have to be willing, if the opportunity is somewhere, to pick up and go. And if you're not, then it's probably not the right market for you. You're not. It's not always going to be as simple as, hey, I live here. There's a job here. I'm going to go work there. It doesn't. The odds aren't in your favor for that. It may happen. You should look there first, but you're going to have to play the odds and look elsewhere a lot of times.
I'd tell you what the biggest difference. I'm sorry, Dave. I'll tell you what the biggest difference has been in the last 20 years. When I first started and when I worked in the business, everybody was into size. I got to work in this size market by the time I'm this age. I got to work and make this amount of money by the time I'm this. Now, there's still that goes on. But the majority of people I have, in fact, probably 70, 85%, it's all quality of life now. It's all about, finding a place that you want to raise your family, being close to your parents who are ailing. Size really doesn't mean that much to a lot of people anymore. It's who you work for. It's the job you're doing and where it is. And I mean, Dave can tell you that years ago, it was always how much money and size is more important. And like I said, you still have that, but not as much as you do nowadays. It's more quality of life and being happy.
Yeah, and I'm a first person example of that. I mean, I thought, Winston-Salem was my first full-time TV job. I had gotten a cup of coffee in Providence. So I started in a top 50 market and went to another top 50 market, but it was between 40 and 50. And maybe in the back of my head, it's, go back to Boston or New York or Philly, whatever. But as soon as I moved here and saw what great quality of life this area offered, and that I got to cover ACC basketball and football. And, oh, yes, the year I moved here was the first year the Charlotte Hornets played, and the Carolina Panthers followed soon after that, and then the Hurricanes. And you have NASCAR, if that's what you're into. But so everything was here. And, top level of everything. So what could be better than great quality of life and great things to cover if you're in this business? So
Winston-Salem State. Forgot that.
Winston-Salem State. I mean, thank you for saying that, because I remember reading in Street and Smith's, college basketball preview, thumb to the back of the magazine, there would be the Division II, which
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't know anything about. Winston-Salem State legendary coach Clarence Big House Gaines, and the fact that I got to cover him his last 5 years. I did a stand-up when he won his 800th game that was used in Black Magic, the two-part doc that ESPN ran on HBCU basketball. I think I'm one of 4 white guys in the whole thing, so that's I call that my lifetime street cred. But all those cool things that you get to experience, and like Dave said, I came here thinking 2 years here and I'll go somewhere else, but the quality of life was great. I went from number 3 sports guy to number 2 within a year. I did weekends for 12 years, but it's when all the sports is going on, and all those people that Brian said, go from Pocatello or Bozeman to Pocatello to Champaign to wherever, you get to know all those people. And so your network just grows like that. And part of the reason that this is successful is because I have gotten to know a lot of people 24 years in TV and then doing this for 10 years. And so I can call on all those people to take part in this. And David Brunner was my agent for a few years. And so we have that long-term relationship. And now Brian, he'll be on my list. So there
That's
you go.
great, though.
So, yeah, Dominic, you had another question.
Yeah, sorry about that earlier. I'm a little different. I'm looking to get into the writing aspect of it and everything. I've been emailing different NFL teams, emailing different websites and everything, trying to get positions. I know you said about finding your niche. My niche, actually, as Mr. Gore knows, is that I'm completely blind, and I'm still doing the writing and trying to make it. So for me, it's a lot of accessibility issues. Like, unfortunately, Brian, working sports website is not the most accessible for me, so it's hard for me to get around on there. And it's not just your site; a lot of sites are like that. So how can I get my name and things like that out there to actually be able to get a position? I've only heard back from one NFL team, that was the Bills, and right now they said they're in a hiring freeze, which is completely understandable. But I'm just trying to make a lot of connections and networking and trying to find places to get out there. Right now I do some writing. I've done hundreds of articles for different websites over the past couple of years, but nothing that has paid anything. So I'm just looking to make a career out of it in this late aspect of my life as I turn 40 next year since going blind.
So a couple of things. One, Dominic, I'd love your feedback on how we can make that better, because we don't have enough experience with making our site more accessible and better. I am actually going through we have a lot of online curriculums that teach people how to get employed in sports, and I'm going through and taking all our articles and putting a voice track to them, so they're almost like audiobooks. We're working on some things like that, but I'd love your feedback, so definitely connect with me so we can talk about how we can make our site more accessible. So that's point number one. Point number two, you said your niche is that you are blind. I would challenge you on that, and I would say, well, what is your storytelling niche? What is your angle? What is your personality that you bring to the table? Because I think, and I mean this as respectfully as I can, being blind is who you are, and that's part of who you are and the way you live and exist, and I get that. But why is somebody going to hire you? Why is somebody what can you bring to the table for them? What's the story you're going to tell when they hire you? So think about that and how you present yourself in that way. If you're writing these great articles, which I'm sure that you are, well, how do you continue to build your brand and grow it in that direction? And what's your voice and what's your style and all of those things as well? So really hammer into the way you want to be perceived in the marketplace and what your story and voice is outside of just that, because I think that is a part of who you are. I do. But like, I'll tell you this really quickly. I just finished interviewing Amina Soliman, who is a Muslim woman and is the player personnel coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles. And 95% of our interview was about being a player personnel coordinator, because that's interesting. 5% of it was about her being a Muslim woman in sports, which is also interesting. But her brand, she wanted to talk about things other than the headliner grabbing kind of clickbaity kind of thing. So I'm saying this and trying to be as respectful as I can. Don't just be a blind person trying to work in the NFL. Tell me what your story is and your point of view and your persona and how you're going to be an asset to an organization. And I think that's what you need to really refine in there. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, no, it does. The only reason I kind of lean in a little bit, I guess you want to put it that way, to the blind is because I actually like I said, I have been trying to network with people, and one of the people that I've networked with is Matthew Barry, and he actually told me to really play up the fact that I do all these great articles and stuff, and the fact that I am blind, because it does give me like that niche, that not really a niche, but it separates me from other people. Like everybody's doing articles and writing, but the fact that I can do it and listen to the games and do all the research and stuff, being blind, he told me to play into that quite a bit.
I would think some of it too would be that you, and I mean this not literally, but I think figuratively, you probably see and feel and hear the game different than anybody else. I'd almost lean into that a little bit as your unique perspective. So I don't know. There's probably a lot of different ways you could take it. It is. I mean, it's an interesting question. It's a tough one to be thrown at the. You're not expecting that question, so it's a little hard to give you your angle and niche, but it is an interesting challenge that you face. I just wonder if there isn't a more. How would you describe your style then, and what you bring to the table as far as an author and writer?
For the most part, I've only been doing fantasy. I just started doing regular football as well, but a lot of it is like I do statistics, but it's not really analytical. It's just the fact that I bring in more of the, if you want to say, the background stuff. I can be sarcastic with it a lot, so there is a little bit of comedy in it, where think like Matthew Barry type, where he adds little jokes, things like that in, but also informationally and everything. And it's basically, I don't see the big plays. I do look more at this, not in an analytical way, but more just the stats by themselves. Like I won't see that Saquon Barkley had 2 rushes for 90 yards in one game, and other people say, oh my God, he had 200 yards in the game on 8 carries. It's like, that's great, but I see the fact that 2 of those were 90 yards, because I don't see those big plays, because I can't see the game anyway. So I look at the fact that yes, he had 10 carries for 200 yards, but 180 of that came on 2 carries. So for the other 8, he only had 20 yards. So you have to look behind the stats, not just look at the flashy plays. I don't see the people juking, jiving, and doing the spin moves and all that kind of stuff. I look at the whole game stats and not just the flashy plays, to look to see how good somebody is and base my opinion on their entire game, and not just the splash plays. Everybody, can have it. Manute Bol had splash plays. It doesn't mean he was better than Shaquille O'Neal.
He totally was.
Isn't there a blind gentleman who does color for minor league baseball?
I'm not sure about minor league baseball, but I do have a friend of mine. His name is Bryce Wheeler. He's actually the disability consultant, which is another aspect I'm trying to get in with a team, is to be a disability consultant. He's the disability consultant for the Baltimore Orioles. And when he was in college, he's completely blind since birth. He was doing, not play-by-play, but he was doing the color commentary and stuff for college baseball and football and basketball.
That's the guy I think that I heard about. Yeah, that's interesting, because I'm sure he hears and sees things differently than a regular color guy would do.
Yeah, he does it with the mic. He uses the microphone. He said he goes out on the court and shoots like free throw baskets to see if the ball comes off, and the person standing on the net will tell him whether it comes off dull or if it's flat or if it's bouncy and stuff like that. So he kind of knows where it's going when it comes off the rim, whether it goes off the back of the rim or if it swooshes and things like that. But yeah, I've actually been talking with him. He's the one that actually got me email addresses for about 12 to 15 different NFL teams that I've been emailing.
Dominic, I'm intrigued by disability consultant and wondering if you could make that a cottage industry for yourself as a freelancer, where you don't just do it for one team, but maybe you have a bunch of teams that you could do that for.
That actually gives me an idea. I have CP, so I'm kind of in the same boat.
I think Dominic too. I think you actually described your niche pretty well. Your voice and your perspective. The fact that you're seeing the game differently, I think that's the way you need to present yourself. And you can weave in the fact that you're blind, so it can be part of your story, but it doesn't have to be the only headline. Give me some substance along with it to say, my style is to be able to see beyond the splash plays and to be able to see the entire game as it unfolds. I think that can be your angle, and that might be the way that you combine both parts of you into your story.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to do with like I said, when I write these teams, I've written to all the general managers of the teams that I've gotten email addresses for, as well as a couple of head coaches and a couple of owners. And I've been telling them that I want to do the writing, but I also want to do the disability consultant avenue, where I can go out in the community and be like an advocate for disability. Like I said, he does that with the Baltimore Orioles. He's the one that actually got them to put Braille on their jerseys a couple years ago, and things like that. So, and he does do it for them. And he also I think he said he picked up a couple of minor league teams this year, so he doesn't just do it for them. And I would love to be able. I was trying to do that for the Baltimore Ravens because I know the National Federation for the Blind is based out of Baltimore, so I figured they had a lot of dealings with it. But unfortunately, the email address that I have for them doesn't work, so I can't get a hold of anybody there.
Well,
I think you're right though. Dave's right on the fact that there's a cottage industry here. If you think about it, like when analytics started first becoming a thing around the Moneyball kind of era, like teams started to slowly start to introduce that within their organization. It took a while, and then it took off, and now everybody has a full-on analytics team. Like this might be the kind of thing where, the Orioles are leading the way in it, but this might be the kind of thing that starts to get itself into more organizations, and you can start to leverage that experience and that knowledge. So definitely,
I would love to. I'm looking, like I said, I'm making contacts. I'm looking to try and get in there. It's very tough for me to be able to obviously find the email addresses. He was able to get some for me, and just to be able to get in contact with a lot of people to be able to do that. So I'm definitely trying to work my way through it. And
so go through the HR department, but in a sense of like diversity inclusion groups are under HR a lot of times, or they're under social responsibility groups, or they're under community relations. So look at the org and figure out where the right person to make contact with, because it's not going to be football ops that are deciding on something like this. It's going to be the organizational team. It's going to be the either the community relations side, or it's going to be the HR side, or it's going to be something underneath those platforms. So if you can talk to the right people, and I would actually say too, have a presentation. Have something that you can deliver to them as a PowerPoint or something like that to explain almost like what's happening with the Orioles, and expand upon that and put your own lens on it, and then be able to share that out with other organizations to say, this is the kind of thing that I could bring to your organization will make a difference for your fan base. Talk money. Talk about how it will impact their fan base. Talk about how it will bring more fans in. Talk about what it would actually look like if it was implemented. If you can translate this into something that makes a positive brand for them and money, now you're talking.
Yeah, and that's what I've been trying to do in my emails to them, is explain how it would really help them to look progressive and help them get more people involved and everything. And I'm not sure who it was. My voiceover came over and said Chad Steele. So thank you. I'll definitely try and get a hold of Chad Steele at the Ravens.
You saw it. Okay, I'm glad you saw that.
Yeah, my phone read it to me.
and if that runs out, the Ravens general manager went to my high school, so I don't know.
Okay, I did try and email him 3 or 4 times, and I couldn't get a hold of him.
Well, it's like Brian.
That's what I mean, though. Is like it's awesome, but the GM isn't gonna. He's worried about training camp, and he's worried about player acquisition. He's worried about coaches and his staff and all these other things going on. You got to talk to the right person, and don't think of it as a dead end. Just think you have to talk to somebody else. Don't think about how I can't get through to the Ravens. Look down the list, find somebody else that's in the right mode. You go on you go on their sites. You can find their entire office staff, and you can usually get contact information pretty easily, and then you just cross-reference with LinkedIn. I mean, seriously, you go through if they don't have the information on their site, you get the name, you go over to LinkedIn, you try to connect with them there, you see if you can get your information to them that way. Just keep trying different ways, different resources, be creative.
All right, and that's what Brandon Bean from the GM from the Bills did when he emailed me back, or his assistant emailed me back and said that he was very intrigued and that he did forward all my information over to the HR department.
Yeah, I don't think reaching out to GMs is your answer. I don't think that's the most efficient way to go about it. I start to look at the other departments that are decision makers, but that will start to see the value of of this kind of a move for the organization. Maybe go through the community relations department, because they are always looking for. They're very connected to causes and the community, and can look at this and say, okay, this might not be right for us, but this is interesting, something that's important, and we can make sure we get it to the right people. So I think you might get some more action if you go through some other groups other than like the GM.
All right, that'd be great. Thanks. And I'll try and get Dave Gorin. I'll try and send you my my email address. If you can get it to Brian, if you want to get a hold of me about the website and stuff, I'd definitely love to help you out with the accessibility and stuff.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, I'm curious.
And with that, I think we've gone past our allotted time. So let me say thank you again to both David and Brian. Oh, no worries. Great discussion. And thank you to everybody for tuning in and participating and coming with questions.
And by the way, if I may just, if anybody wants to get a hold of me, please go to my website, Free plug, dbandassociates.com. You'll see the quality of people we have, the diversity of people we have, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
And what is Brian's website, David?
Don't even
One
ask
more
me.
plug.
David's good at this. He's a pro.
Workingsports.com. So thank
Yep.
you, Brian.
You
Thank
can connect with me
David.
on LinkedIn or any of the other avenues.
That's
You know,
right.
send me one.
Show your research skills. Find them.
That's right.
That's it. Thanks for a great week again. We'll see everybody next week with something that probably won't be as good as it was this week. Have a good week.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.